Welcome everyone to the 2016 Dodge Challenger Scat Pack Edition. At first glance you might be wondering why anyone would want to buy a car with the word poop in the name.
It's more like continuous level out shot.
However, Chrysler's been using the term Scat Pack to describe its muscle cars that were stripped down on amenities but very high in the performance department since the late 60s. The Scat Pack cars were designed to be a tier above the standard RT cars in the performance department, with lack of creature comforts like air conditioning or AM/FM radio to weigh the car down, coupled with bigger engines, better gear ratios, and bigger brakes most of the time. They would get down the track so fast that it would cause unwanted bowel movements, and maybe that's why they called it Scat Pack. Now, that's not to say you couldn't add options to your Scat Pack, like AM/FM radio or wood paneling interior that looks like the inside of Charles Manson's basement. But these cars weren't designed to be optioned out. They were designed to be stripped down, bare bones, track monsters that would dominate any Mustang or Camaro or Chevelle or whatever car showed up at the track. So at a glance you're thinking, this is a dedicated track toy. I can't drive this every day, so why would I spend $40,000 on a car with no amenities and a name that makes people think I'm a poop enthusiast? But the fact of the matter is, this new Scat Pack does have all those things. It's got power steering, it's got big brakes, it's got air conditioning, and a great stereo and satellite navigation, and seats that make you feel like you're driving a lazy boy recliner down the road. Oh, and the silly graphic that reminds you that the whole car is a cartoon character. This car belongs to my good friend Bill, and before today, Bill had never let anyone else ever drive the car. So after we promised that we would try our hardest not to wreck the car, Ryan hit Bill with some really technical questions.
So what's the fastest you got in this thing?
Okay, that didn't really pan out, obviously, so I'll give you the rundown. This car has the optional, functioning shaker hood scoop that sits atop a 6.4-liter Hemi V8. That comes out to 392 cubic inches, which if you know anything about classic Mopars, sounds a bit like a money grab. Talking to you, 5.0 Mustang! But it also comes with a 6-speed transmission, satellite navigation, air conditioning, all the stuff we talked about earlier. The brakes aren't quite as big as the SRT8, but they're still 4-piston Brembos, and you save $7,000 to $10,000 over the SRT8 with this car. As is becoming common practice with manufacturers these days, this car is equipped with a sport mode. It's got active dynamic exhaust, which makes the car louder when you hit that sport button, and the steering also gets a little heavier, which I believe is to synthesize more road feel, but to me it just feels like heavier steering. But hey, what the soon-to-be retired AARP members who can afford these cars don't know won't hurt them. But back to that dynamic exhaust, because it's one of my favorite parts about this car. It's active when you start it up, which means that when you first crank it up on a cold morning, it's going to be a little louder till it warms up to allow more airflow. But also, when you hit the sport button, it's going to be wide open to make the car as loud as possible. I like that. I like that I don't have to cut the factory mufflers off and put some cheap Flowmasters on it to get that loud sound that people in our part of the country associate with good or fast, which for the life of me I've never been able to figure out. But it means you don't have to live with the same exhaust every day, and that's fantastic. I've been dreaming of that since my first car. The first car I got when I was 16 had Flowmasters on it, and I've had a headache ever since. And now every time I hear change rattling in the cup holder, I get a nervous twitch. Hey, if you're driving something with Flowmasters on it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't pretend they sound good, because they don't. Seriously, I can make a better muffler with a coffee can and a stick welder. But this car solves that problem. You don't have to put aftermarket exhaust on it to make it sound the way you want, because you can already do that with the push of a button. Bill's laundry list of cars is longer than the director's cut of Lord of the Rings, but he's pretty adamant that this is by far his favorite one. And it being his favorite, we had to promise that we'd be gentle on it, seeing as we were just a couple 20-something-year-olds that he was letting drive his most prized possession.
You never hit 150?
Not in the car.
So at this point, we ask the question, why not buy a Hellcat?
Sure, you could spend an extra 30 grand and get 700 horsepower, but when I drive this car, the last thing I'm thinking is it needs more power. It's so much more comfortable than a Camaro, and it's got more room than the Mustang. The clutch is nice and light, the gearbox goes where it's supposed to. It is a little jiggly, like you get a lot of feedback through the shifter, but I mean, it's a muscle car. Just the torque just overloads. For an engine that's still got the cam in the block, this thing makes torque just non-stop from beginning to the end of the red line.
I've driven plenty of Dodge Challengers, and I've always felt like they're more of the gentleman's muscle car. They're not the fastest, they're not the most intuitive, they're not for the teenager who's spending his weekends trying to beat VTEC swapped Hondas. But this is more of a driver's car than I was expecting.
I expected to be carted around in it more than experience it, and I was completely wrong. It's fantastic to drive, and you do feel it struggling to manage its weight a little bit. I can understand why people would want the more power, but at the same time, you're definitely going faster than it feels like. It's actually pretty refined.
So there you have it. If you want our opinion, save yourself 30 grand over the Hellcat and buy the Scat Pack. Spend another 5 grand on a blower and blow Hellcat's doors off.
Man, what's that knocking in the motor now?